Hello, my name is Ken Small. I'm with SSA Architecture in Las Vegas, Nevada. We practice architecture in Nevada, California, Arizona, and some other states. This is the week of the CCP coronavirus, and while everybody's home, it brought to mind for me some very good ideas that are occasionally being used in new architecture to help people avoid coming down with this type of disease and other diseases and other problems that have to do with respiratory conditions. And so I want to talk about these issues and how you might implement them on your building or your home if it's not a commercial building you're interested in operating or constructing. All these ideas can be retroactively installed. So if you have an old building that's been around for a long time, these will apply to that building through some fairly minor modifications. So the things that I want to talk about are lighting, air conditioning, and general environmental conditions. There have been quite a few studies related to education that show that improving these conditions improves test scores for students. And the reason why they improve the test scores for students is that when students or teachers aren't out sick, then they attend school more often and get more education during the normal school year, and therefore, because they're healthier, they succeed more. So let's start with lighting for a minute. And we're going to include this as a complementary implementation with some of the other modalities that we're going to talk about next. But I know you won't find this unbelievable, and it's not really any news that I'm offering to you that sunlight is good for people. And but what's important about that to you inside your building is that UV light kills germs, and this is the reason why your grandmother hung linens out on the clothesline, hung rugs out on the clothesline without either being able to wash them or washing them. And what we've done in modern buildings is we've designed windows and skylights that eliminate UV light, which is not good. The reason why they use UV light filters on skylights and windows is because the UV light bleaches out your colors on your textiles like furniture, rugs, clothing, anything that's exposed to UV light. But the advantage of UV light, if it was allowed to shine in, would be to, in essence, clean the room. Of course, it's not going to completely sterilize it, but it's one of those things where every little bit helps. And so if you had a skylight without a UV light filter and it was shining over the entire room, that would be very helpful. And the same thing for all the windows in a room, say a waiting area in a doctor's office or something like that, where sick people inherently congregate, then it's really a pretty bad idea to put a UV light filter on the glazing system. So it's a increased cost, but since they do it to all the glass pretty much, it actually ends up being more costly to take it out, especially ordering windows that don't have it. So UV light is important, and you can buy UV light bulbs. So this is one that makes it very easy for you to help yourself. Just take your old screw-in light bulbs and replace them with UV light bulbs, and these are readily available, and then the UV light will help to a moderate extent clean the air. So UV light is the first thing that is helpful. Of course, if you're just talking about doing it without architecture, then you're probably having a more healthy meeting outside at a picnic table than you are inside in an enclosed room with somebody who's sick. Obviously, you get a lot more fresh air, a lot more air changes. The likelihood that you'll directly breathe whatever they're exhaling is less out of the picnic table. So fresh air changes are very helpful, and being outside in sunlight is very helpful. So maybe the answer is to not have any architecture at all. We'll just all live outdoors. Of course, that's ridiculous, but it makes a point about the value of sunlight and fresh air. So moving on from lighting and UV light and daylighting, let's talk about air conditioning systems. Not just refrigerated air, but air conditioning that heats or cools air or humidifies or dehumidifies air within your house or building. The common air conditioning system that you see in virtually all commercial buildings is called mixed air. And so I've created a little sketch of what mixed air looks like here. I'll put it up for you. And what's happening with mixed air is that air is blown in through the ceiling from one or more air registers, supplies blowing into the room, and then it sort of swirls around the room, and then it's returned to the air conditioning unit through the ceiling at return. And the advantage of this is it's cheap to build, and everybody knows how to do it. The disadvantage is that when the air is swirling around the room, hence the name mixed air, if you exhale or sneeze out a disease, or there's some kind of other particle in the room that bothers you, pollen or mold or somebody's perfume or what have you, noxious aroma of the person sitting next to you, then you're inhaling that in the mixed air environment. This is why a lot of people think that they're more likely to get sick on airplanes, because they are recirculating the air before they replace it with fresh air. And so, of course, you are breathing whatever everybody else is exhaling. So what is the solution for that? Well, the solution for that problem was invented a long time ago, and we've done it on quite a few projects. But it's a hard sell for customers because it's non-standard. It uses all standard parts, the same parts and pieces as a standard air conditioning system. But because most business people and homeowners make their decision about what they're going to do on the basis of first cost, this system has a higher first cost. So here's an example. This is called displacement air conditioning. And the way displacement air conditioning works is, if you can imagine a aquarium, a fish tank, and imagine that the water in the fish tank is actually the air that you breathe. If you pump air in at the bottom and return it back to the pump at the top, then what you're doing is you're filling up the fish tank from the bottom to the top. And so if you're on the other side of the room and you sneeze in a mixed air environment, I breathe it before it returns back to the central air conditioning unit. But in a displacement ventilation system, your air coming off of you goes straight up. Even if we're sitting next to each other in the Las Vegas environment, where almost all the load is air conditioning, cooling, then hot air rises and cold air goes down, then you have basically your room is a pressurized bag. And so whether you're heating or you're cooling, when you blow in at the top and you suck the return air out at the top, then that air is going to blow by you vertically and go straight up. And when you sneeze across the room, I don't breathe it, or at least I don't breathe it as much. And if you're sitting directly next to me, I don't breathe it as much, but I still am going to be exposed to it. Now, this doesn't mean necessarily that I'm going to not catch something that's terribly virulent. This is a statistical improvement over the regular air conditioning system, the mixed air system. And so The advantage of the displacement air conditioning system, it goes beyond the issue of clean air. And so let me show you another diagram in a taller room. And so this diagram would be something like a retail warehouse where you have a very tall room, and we're bringing air in here at the bottom, and we're sucking it out at, say, 8 feet above the floor. And the reason why that's valuable is because you're not cooling the space above that 8-foot line. So if you have a ceiling in a retail area where, say, a liquor store that's set up like a warehouse type liquor store, rarely does anybody go above 8 feet above the finished floor. And so all that air above 8 feet is allowed to stratify, and you're not paying to cool it. So there's a substantial savings in the operational cost of displacement air when you're in rooms that have tall ceilings. This isn't quite as valuable in single-family residential, but when you get into larger homes that have taller ceilings, it can be advantageous financially. You can get a return on investment just because of the cooling cost. And so now let's look at combining the two, the UV light and the displacement air. So I'm showing this duct coming down here that's drawing the return air back to the central air conditioning system, and we're cooling the lower 8 feet of what looks like a 16 or 20 foot ceiling, and then we're bringing the air from the central air conditioning unit down to the floor level and blowing it out again. So you get your savings in air conditioning cost, and you get your improved indoor air quality due to displacement ventilation. But up at the top here, where we would normally expect me to show a air conditioning unit, I'm showing a light bulb. And the advantage of the light bulb is that it's a UV light. And so right now, if you have a typical air conditioning system we find in the majority of buildings in Las Vegas, including homes, you have a package unit up on your roof, and you can have an electrician or an air conditioning person go up and install a UV light bulb on your air conditioning system, and then the return air will be drawn past the UV light bulb. And since we know UV light helps sanitize the air, that means when the return air comes back through the air conditioning unit and gets blown back into the room, some or all of the bad stuff that was in the air has been killed. So this is very helpful for people who have pollen allergies, but it also helps with a lot of other things, mold and disease. And so what you would be doing is you would be running a normal air conditioning system, normal thermostat, no changes to it at all. The other YouTube videos that are on this topic are mostly wrong about how to install it. They show the UV light bulb being on 24/7, but actually the UV light bulbs that are available will run on the same low voltage power that is already transformed inside the air conditioning unit. And so the UV light bulb can just come on when the fan is on. And so they say in the other YouTube videos that a bulb will last a year or 6 months or something like that. I have a bulb in one of my air conditioning units that's been in there for 3 years. I went up there every year to see at the beginning of allergy season, which is right now for me, and to see if it was okay to go again. And it still has no sign of even a little deterioration after 3 years. And that's because the fan cycle on-off times work with the light bulb, and so the light bulb isn't on 24/7 like they tell you to wire it up. I don't know if the YouTube video makers have some tie-in to the light bulb people that want you to buy more light bulbs, but to me it doesn't make any sense because you're paying the bulb for the electricity to have the bulb on. You're paying to wear the bulb out, but the only time the bulb really does any function is when the air is blowing. So you hook it up to the system so that it comes on when the blower comes on. And if you and I are in the room together and you've got some disease that I don't know about, or we're in a big waiting room at the doctor's office waiting to be treated, and you know you've got the flu, you're there because of the flu, even if you're wearing a mask, it's not that useful to keep me from getting it. But the displacement air with the UV light bulb is helpful. Again, nothing's perfect, and add to that, it might be helpful if they had some skylights that were not UV filtered in the same room. But just talking about statistical improvements, that if you install this type of system, the displacement air system, and run your return air through a UV light bulb, then you're going to have a significant improvement. The improvement will always depend on what it is you're trying to avoid. So let's say those are the two main things that you can do for yourself, but there's a third thing which I think is far more important. And this necessarily isn't a prescription for do this and then it solves that problem, but it's the overall issue of general environmental conditions. So if you live in a dank, dark basement apartment with no windows and mold growing on the walls, you're just not going to live as long as if you live in a nice sunny apartment with no mold and fresh air. That's because all this puts a load on your system that your system is constantly fighting off. And if you're a young person going to college and you can only afford a cheap apartment and you think, yeah, I'm 20 years old, I can withstand anything, that may very well be true. But what happens is all these loads on your system build up and they knock down your capability to fight off real diseases. And so you want to keep your system running at optimal levels so that you can succeed as much as possible, regardless of disease. I mean, if you're well rested and healthy, you're going to do better at school or work or whatever than if you aren't. So a lot of these environmental conditions that are inside buildings that were designed with only first cost in mind, and many of them designed with only first cost in mind 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years ago, then you're seeing very poor indoor air quality conditions, and helping those indoor air quality conditions as much as you can will improve your general good health. Now, I'm not a doctor, so this isn't medical advice. I'm an architect, so this is building advice. My building advice is that you don't want any mold, right? It's pretty well known right now. Mold is really bad. The UV light kills mold. If somebody comes into your building and they have mold on them, if there are favorable conditions, then the mold will grow and continue. But if you're using something like the displacement air and UV light bulbs, the mold will probably be killed before it has a chance to take hold. There are a lot of other problems inside your house having to do with indoor air quality issues, like chemical off-gassing and dust and pollen, that can be solved by improving your air conditioning system. It may be fairly simple to just get higher quality air filters. It may be a little bit more expensive, like installing the UV light in your HVAC system on the roof, or if you have a cold weather climate type air conditioning system, it can be done in the basement or in the closet, wherever your air conditioning system is. And then these things help kill dust, dust mites, pollen, and things like that. The next thing is that the building code requires that you have a certain amount of fresh air pumped into your building. And in an environment like Las Vegas, we often find that the building operators found it necessary to close the fresh air intake during July and August because the air conditioning system just won't keep up when it's 125 degrees outside. And so that may be okay, but when you get into the cooler months and you don't need it anymore, then you need to remember to open up the fresh air again. And quite frankly, it really should be fixed in a better way than this first cost only stopgap measure of closing the fresh air. So there's something called an air-to-air heat exchanger, which will substantially reduce the problem of bringing in super hot air to cool when it's July and August. Well, we really have 10 hot months out of the year, 10 months where you might be air conditioning in Vegas. But regardless of what your weather environment is, getting a percentage of fresh air into your building is necessary for general good indoor air quality. Now, why am I not giving you a number? Well, that's because you need to just keep increasing the intake of fresh air until you feel like you're not being bothered anymore by the building. If you're not sensitive to that, then you can look at the building code where you're at and use that number. But really what's happening is that you have furniture and carpets and wall coverings that are off-gassing chemicals for years after they're installed, and some of them forever. Paint is another one. And so you're breathing all those chemicals, and then your system has to somehow find a way to remove them, poop them out or sweat them out or whatever. And so this is placing a load on your system. Now, I recently bought a headboard within 4 or 5 years ago, and almost immediately the dust liner on the back of the headboard just fell apart. And the purpose of having a dust liner underneath or behind a piece of furniture is to keep the dust from coming out of the furniture into the indoor air quality. But in fact, it was doing just the opposite. The liner was deteriorating and contaminating the indoor air quality. So trying to do things that alleviate these kind of problems really depends on how bad your problems are. If you're in a little tiny place and it's got all hard floors, either hardwood or linoleum or something like that, then you're way better off than somebody who has carpet and old overstuffed furniture. So this is just something you have to make a decision about. And I realize that, especially here in the Vegas environment where it's so expensive to cool during these super hot months, that people may make a trade-off and close off that fresh air during the hottest months, maybe even just because their air conditioning system won't keep up. But then during the other months, you need to open it up and frankly, just open a window if you have those kind of operable windows, which many people do not, but if you do, open a window. So these are the key elements to helping yourself, and when you have good indoor air quality, then you're going to be in a situation where when you do eventually catch a disease, which you will, because this is not going to help you from ever catching cold or flu or whatever, but when you do finally catch it, if you have less of a load on your system, then your system is better to fight off whatever's attacking you. So let me bring this back to what I do for a living and talk to you about building a new house, building a new office, or what have you. I've been suggesting this stuff for years, and it's a very hard sell, even though it's not a tremendous increased cost in the building itself, because appraisers don't really understand it. They don't give additional value to it. They just go, oh, you built a doctor's office with 3,000 square feet and 10 exam rooms, so from that it's worth $300,000. And they might look at things like your countertops are granite or something like that, but they don't really delve into the details of how the building is designed. And so for that reason, very, very few people are doing it. So it's up to the building code to try to implement these things, and they're not doing it either. It's up to you as a building owner whether you want to spend the additional money to do it. And the cost for a businessman or a businesswoman who's paying for the operation of a business and employees is very hard to quantify, because if you do something like the displacement air and the UV light, then your absenteeism goes down. If you're not paying employees for sick time, then obviously you've saved a lot of money, and it's very easy to recover those costs. But if your employees don't like working for you and they just wait till they've accrued a week's worth of sick time and they go, well, if I don't take it, I won't get paid for it. So my aunt, uncle, brother is coming to visit town next week and I'll call in sick for 3 days. Then you don't gain anything, because they're not really sick, they're just taking their sick time. So what about your own personal health then? And that's what I would look to. I think that's the most important thing to me, and as well as the health of my family, that if these people aren't giving that disease to me, what's that worth? And let me talk about a couple of buildings that we've done this successfully on. In all of Clark County, all the middle schools in Clark County failed No Child Left Behind, except one in Sandy Valley. And I can't say that it's completely my fault, because I'm not a teacher, and this all is relying on good teachers too. But we did daylighting in the Sandy Valley Middle School building, and it was the only middle school building that had daylighting, and it was the only middle school that passed No Child Left Behind. With that success, the school district allowed us to do the same thing at John S. Park Elementary School, and that was done after the No Child Left Behind ended, and so we don't know the statistical analysis on that, but I do believe that it was helpful. And so we can do this in your house, we can do this in your office building. If you're a medical professional, you might not want to be bothered doing it in all the exam rooms, but definitely in the waiting area. And the way this works, it can be done on the same system, displacement area in the waiting area, and not in the exam rooms, using the one and shared HVAC system on the roof. So you can pick and choose where you want to use it. And then for your home, same thing. Might use it in some rooms and not in others. But in terms of general comfort, the general comfort of the displacement air can be much better in a home. The home has to be engineered with it included, though. Well, these aren't the only things that can be done in your new building to make things a lot simpler and a lot easier to live and a lot healthier for you and the guests in your building. But these are some major issues that could be implemented today. And so I hope that you find them useful. And if you're thinking of hiring an architect to do a quality building, I hope you'll give me a call. My name is Ken Small, and I'm with SSA Architecture in Las Vegas, Nevada, 702-873-1718. We're at 7040 Laredo Street, Suite C, 89117. Thanks a lot for watching, and please like and subscribe. We have many other videos on many other topics having to do with building construction and development, and I hope you'll watch them all. Thanks.